That didn't work out so well. It's barely the beginning of the year and I'm already getting to the point where I have to start stepping away from the car and going back to work. Usually this doesn't happen to me until March. I'm an automotive filmmaker and most racing happens in the summer. So January, February, and sometimes March, I get to stay home and wrench on my cars. But lately I've already been having to go out of town and work, which is great because I obviously need to make money for this car to pay for all this crap. Might not be what everybody wants to see. So I apologize for that, but I'm gonna keep the ball rolling on this thing as fast as I can for as long as I can. And hopefully while I'm in town, I'll be able to get this thing done. It's not that far. I mean, it looks like crap, but really, once I start on the body kit here in the next few weeks and start wrapping it, the car is gonna come together really fast and it's gonna look pretty badass. Last time we left off here at the trunk, I was doing my damnedest to get this thing cleaned up, painted, get the air ride moved around nice and organized, and make some hard lines for this thing. I bought some nice, shiny stainless steel for this, and it turns out you cannot use this for the push-to-connect fittings that I have because the tiny little teeth in those fittings can't hold on. Somebody from Bag Riders hit me up and said, hey man, I saw that you were doing this and you should really reconsider, do not use stainless on those. You need to use aluminum or copper. So I thought that might be a cool idea. You know, copper might go good with the purple and the white, so why not? Let's give this a shot. About 35 bucks, 20 feet of it, and let's see if I can get some of these lines bent and see how they fit. Before I get ahead of myself though, I need to move the Schrader valve on this tank. I put a valve on here so that I could fill it up with any air compressor, and unfortunately I put it in the one spot where it's not gonna work because it's crashing into the pump that's mounted under the tank. So I'm gonna pull this tank off and move that over. Also deal with a couple of other things under here. This is just exactly the same kind of valve you'd have on your car to pump up the tire. It's just nice to be able to use it in case of emergency if there's something wrong with your pumps, or actually if you want to get the air out of the tank, it works really good for that too. I started building a little harness here, nothing special really. It's just gonna be powering the air ride and the fuel pump. Gonna have fused power going into both of these and power out for the pump for the air ride, and then obviously for the fuel pump, and then a key on to turn those on when the car is turned on. This wiring should be way easier than it is. I don't know why this keeps getting so confusing to me, but I stared at it for about 2 hours and finally figured it all out. First of all, I forgot there's two separate relays for the air ride, one that controls the pump and one that controls the management. And I had everything hooked up to the trigger for the fuel pump, which I thought was a clever idea, but it was actually bad because the fuel pump only comes on for the first couple seconds that you key on. So I had the key on and it wasn't getting any power to the air ride and couldn't figure it out. Finally, got that sorted. I've left the air pump triggered off the fuel pump, which is really cool because now the air pump will only come on if the car is running. So the air pump won't be able to drain my battery if I'm just sitting in the car with the key on, which happens every once in a while. The management for the air ride now is just a true key on, so whenever I'm parked, I could switch the key to the on position and air the car down without actually turning the car on, which is really nice. So hopefully that all makes sense. Hopefully I can start getting this all back together now. I'm just so sick of looking at it. I just want it to be done. So I'm gonna start soldering some of this stuff together and putting the expandable tubing on, and it'll look really nice when it's done, but it has been a major headache so far. I just got back from being out of town for the last 4 days. I was in Orlando, Florida, shooting some drag racing, and it looks like the Quattro's got a little leak coming out of it. Wouldn't be surprised. It definitely needs some new gaskets. I think that's actually coolant. Huh. Alrighty then. It looks like it's leaking from the heater valve, which is the little valve that you open and close when you turn your dash vents from hot to cold, which is very surprising to me because that's a brand new part that I just replaced. So the part that I got must have been a piece of crap. I think it's time we do some plumbing. I always tell myself I'm gonna stop doing the Instagram reels because they're way overproduced. You know, I shoot them on my Red and it takes up a bunch of time that I could be working on the car otherwise, but for some reason I have so much fun doing them. They're kind of like a scripted thing and it makes me feel like I'm acting, and it really makes me think about what I'm actually doing on the car and why and how, and it's really fun explaining stuff to people. This is a push-to-connect bulkhead fitting, and what I'm gonna do is drill a hole through the shock tower and mount this on there so that the hard lines can connect into it. Right now I had those PVC lines just sent through a little hole, and that's actually pretty sketchy because if that thing wears out over time and ruptures, you're gonna have all the air come out of your bag and you're gonna be stuck on the side of the road basically. So this is like the super legit way to set up your air ride and to try to make it as reliable as possible so those lines aren't sliding through that hole back and forward. When you push in on this fitting here, the teeth actually bend in and disappear. And the problem is this stainless is too hard for these teeth to bite. So what will happen is it'll just slide off, and that could cause, a rupture basically. So let's grab a piece of copper and see what happens when I stick this on here. I'm sure it's probably locked on there real good. Yep. All right, so now if I do this, oh wow, you can actually see like the little bite marks in there. Remember like 4 episodes ago when I bought this macro lens and said it was kind of pointless and stupid? Well, I guess it wasn't that stupid. They say you should never jack up your car without any air in the bags, because what will happen is when the car lifts up and the strut assembly is pulled down by gravity, it'll cause a vacuum inside your bag and your bag will basically get sucked in, and there's nothing wrong with that. The problem arises is when you put the car back down, there's a pretty good chance that bag is going to get crushed inside on itself and not roll over the strut like it's supposed to, and there's a possibility that it could get pinched and actually tear. So that's the reason you don't want to do that. My lines are cut right now so they can't actually be pulled under vacuum since there won't be anything for them to suck against, so should be totally fine in this circumstance. All of the little TikTok Gen Z children kind of lost their minds when they saw the radius fenders on this car when I pulled the wide body off, and were freaking out about the rust, and it's not that bad. It's just a tiny bit of surface rust. I think these people have never seen a drift car that was built by a 20-year-old in their garage before, because I'm not that great of a welder. I'll sand this down a little and take another whack at it now that I've fixed a few things on my MIG and make it look a little bit nicer for y'all so that everybody can be happy. It's kind of hard to see under here, but you can kind of see that air line going straight to the coilover bag through the strut tower. This is just the PVC ones that I was using. I'm gonna take this out and put that bulkhead fitting through, and then probably just use like a little 2 or 3 inch piece of the PVC line to connect the two together. So that will be kind of cool. Hopefully there's no like movement in there. There shouldn't be. And it should be really nice and reliable. The hole was already there for the previous line. I just need to make it a little bit bigger so that the bulkhead fitting can go through. And then we'll just install this guy. That was a pretty massive hole I had to blast through there, but it's going to be a lot better than just the PVC tube going through the sheet metal. That always sketched me out when going on long drives that something was going to rupture because of that. I'm going to flip the strut around 180 so that the compression fitting is facing outwards. That'll not only make it a little bit easier to install this hose, but it's also going to make it so that the tube just has a lot more room to work with. If there's ever a reason that I need to service this on the side of the road, I don't want to have that compression fitting on the inside of the strut. It's just going to make everything a little bit more complicated. Hopefully that's enough slack to get that all back up in there. I've got tons and tons of PVC line if I have to make another one, so no big deal. They usually give you like 50 feet of it when you buy a kit, and I bought a bunch of spare just in case for like road trips and whatnot. If you have like a front line rupture, that line is like 15 feet long, so you got to replace the whole thing from the bag all the way back to the management. That's one nice thing about these bulkhead fittings. It shortens the length of each line, but it also creates points where there could be more leaks. So I'm hoping nothing leaks. If it does, the management does compensate for it if it's a slow leak. So not that big of a deal, but I would just prefer to have a system that has 0 leaks. Unfortunately, I can see in here that I've got a torn axle boot. It's going to be something I'm going to have to wait till later to replace, but I just replaced these axles probably about a year or 2 ago, so they're fairly new. I think what's happened is this upper tie rod has kind of sagged because it has a little bit of rotation to it because of the heim joints. I must have tightened it in the wrong spot now, so you can see if this thing comes down, it actually touches the boot. I'm guessing that's probably what happened at some point when I was driving it. So that's kind of a bummer, but axles are relatively inexpensive, so maybe I'll just do a new one. I'll put the bulkhead on the driver's side in later today. I'm kind of excited to start bending some lines. I really want to see how that copper is to work with. I really like the stainless. It was a little bit difficult to bend and things. Obviously that's not going to work now. It's a bummer that it's not going to be as shiny as the stainless, but we'll see. I think the copper will look really nice too. This is just a little cutter that spins around the hard line and cuts it tiny little amounts at a time, and then you just give it a deburr once you're done and you're pretty much ready to go. I already had this piece made out of stainless on the last episode, which didn't work, so I got my copper cut to the exact same length. I just need to straighten it out now, and I've got this $30 tool. Here you can buy other ones that are upwards of $200. So this just kind of slides on here like that and slowly straightens the tubing out. One thing that I did that you really want to watch out for is I slid this thing down so fast on accident that it hit me right in the thumb, and that was really painful. So, you know, you live through that once and then hopefully don't do it again. Ow! God, this thing sucks. I figured it'd be a pretty easy idea to get this thing nice and polished up, so I just stuck it in the drill and kind of just spun it with some polishing compound. Might be a little bit hard to see, but it is much shinier than the original, so that's really nice. Make it look pretty sweet. Takes a little while to get the bender figured out. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. You just start at 0 here and start going around. Sometimes the bend doesn't exactly start where you want it, so you can kind of slip the tubing a little bit forward or back and still make it work. Usually you got to go a few degrees past the bend because the metal has a little bit of like tenseness to it and it wants to spring back a little, but you just take it slow and figure it out as you go. It's not too bad. It's definitely a little bit easier to bend than the stainless, that's for sure. Not really taking my time here. Kind of just feel like the more you nitpick at it, the more expectation that you have that it's going to be perfect, and more than likely it's not going to be. So I need to figure out where the other rear hardline is going to go. I kind of have to have like a plan in my head here how everything's going to run. It kind of has to look cool, like a labyrinth or something. If there's hardlines just going every which direction that don't really look like they're organized at all, it's going to be kind of weird. So I think I have a couple ideas and I'm just going to run with it. Uh-oh. That didn't work out so well. Maybe you need to slow it down a bit. And you can kind of finesse these lines here and there as long as you get the lengths pretty dang close. I've got the 2 rear lines going to the bags. I still need to drill out that driver's side bulkhead and install that, but that should be pretty quick now that I've done it once and kind of figured out all the tools for that. I've got the line going from the tank to the management, so I just need to make the lines for the front, which should be pretty easy because they're really just going to come down and follow this 3rd line and go up over the hump and then disappear. So they're pretty much going to be a mimic of each other. They're going to be almost the exact same thing. One's just going to be a tiny bit longer. So I think I should be able to wrap this up here pretty soon. Makes me really happy. I bought like 10 of these, and they're really just to hold fuel lines. They just look like that. And I guess you could use these to clamp the lines down was kind of my idea. They're a little bit too big. They said that they're for 1/4 inch, but this is definitely not 1/4 inch, as you can see. So who knows, maybe I'll use a couple of these to clamp the lines in certain spaces so that they're equidistant from each other, and that might make it look clean. But I don't know, I'm afraid this might tack it up a little bit. It might just be too much stuff. It'd be cool if they're all parallel just by themselves without having to be held. I've mentioned that the front lines are going to kind of disappear and they're going to be converted to push to connect, and I'll show you what I mean by that. The front line comes up behind the tank here and it goes over this hump where the gas tank is, and when it bends down it goes behind the delete panel. Now behind that delete panel I'm going to use one of these push to connect junctions is what they call it, and from there it's going to turn into a PVC line. I was desperately trying to finish the Instagram video that I was making about the hard line so that I could go get my haircut finally. I've been waiting for weeks to get my haircut. The trunk is almost there. I need to do the wiring, but I don't have time for that tonight because I'm flying back to Florida in the morning to do the 24 hours of Rolex with race service. We're going to be shooting a bunch of stuff out there for Porsche. So next week's video will be all about that, my experience out there as a freelance filmmaker. When I get back, I'm gonna weld up these holes in the trunk so that we can install the new wing and start wrapping the car. We'll be doing the roof and then also this carbon fiber hood. I can't wait to get that on. I got some really cool new hood latches to put on, so that will be really fun getting some body panels back on the car. Really excited and looking forward to that. Check your polarizer.